The elevator doors opened. Elisa Lam stepped inside. She pressed several buttons, then suddenly moved toward the corner as if she was trying to hide from someone. She looked out into the hallway. She stepped back inside. She pressed buttons again. Then she walked out of the elevator and disappeared. But there was something even stranger. The elevator had cameras. The footage showed almost everything Elisa did during those final moments. Yet it didn't show what happened to her. And when investigators eventually discovered where she had ended up, the mystery became even more disturbing. Because Elisa Lam wasn't found in a dark alley. She wasn't discovered in an abandoned building. She was found inside a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. How did a 21-year-old woman get there? Why did she behave so strangely in the elevator? And was the mysterious footage evidence of something sinister, or simply the final moments of a young woman experiencing a terrible crisis? This is the story of Elisa Lam. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old Canadian student from Vancouver, British Columbia. In January 2013, she was traveling alone through California. For Elisa, the trip was supposed to be an opportunity to explore, experience something different, and eventually continue her journey. On January 26, she arrived in Los Angeles. She checked into the Cecil Hotel, a building with a long and troubled history in downtown Los Angeles. The Cecil had opened in 1924. Over the decades, the hotel developed a dark reputation because of numerous deaths, suicides, murders, and other disturbing incidents associated with the property. But when Elisa checked in, there was no reason for her to believe that her trip would end there. Initially, she was placed in a shared room. According to reports, concerns were later raised about her behavior, and she was moved into a room by herself. She continued communicating with her family during her trip. Then, on January 31st, something changed. Elisa disappeared. Her family couldn't reach her. She didn't return home. She wasn't answering her phone. And nobody seemed to know where she had gone. Her family contacted authorities. The search began. Then investigators obtained something that would change the case forever. Security footage from one of the hotel's elevators. The video was grainy. The timestamp was visible. There was no dramatic soundtrack. No obvious attacker. No explanation. Just a young woman inside an elevator. Elisa entered. She pressed several buttons. The elevator doors appeared to remain open. Elisa looked outside. She stepped toward the hallway. Then she quickly moved back inside. She pressed more buttons. She looked toward the hallway again. She moved strangely. At one point, she appeared to press herself against the side of the elevator. Then she stepped outside. She moved her arms. She looked toward different directions in the hallway. She seemed to be communicating with someone or perhaps reacting to something only she could see. Then she walked away. The elevator doors closed. And Elisa was never seen alive again. The footage immediately raised questions. Who was she looking at? Was someone standing outside the elevator? Was she hiding from someone? Was somebody following her? Why wouldn't the elevator doors close normally? Why did she repeatedly press the buttons? And most importantly, where did she go after leaving the elevator? Investigators began searching the Cecil Hotel. Her belongings were examined. Her room was checked. Hotel employees were questioned. Police also investigated the possibility that Elisa had left the building voluntarily. But there was no clear explanation for her disappearance. As the days passed, concern grew. Then investigators discovered something unexpected. The hotel's water supply had a problem. Guests had complained about strange water pressure and discoloration. That led investigators toward the hotel's rooftop. There were several large water tanks on the roof. At first, there was no obvious reason to believe Elisa would be there. The tanks were large, enclosed containers used to supply water to the building. But investigators eventually inspected one of them. And inside was Elisa Lam. Her body was discovered on February 19, 2013. She had been missing for nearly 3 weeks. The discovery immediately transformed the case. The question was no longer simply, where had Elisa gone? Now investigators had to determine, how did she end up inside a water tank on the roof? The rooftop was not an ordinary public area. The water tanks were large and elevated. That raised an obvious question. How could Elisa have reached them? Did someone take her there? Did she climb there herself? Was the rooftop accessible? Could the water tank have been opened from the outside? Investigators examined the circumstances surrounding her death. The official investigation ultimately concluded that Elisa's death was an accidental drowning. The Los Angeles County coroner ruled the manner of death as accidental. The report also listed bipolar disorder as a significant underlying condition. There were no injuries consistent with a violent assault that established homicide. Toxicology did not establish that she had been murdered. For investigators, the case had an official explanation. But for the public, the mystery was far from over. The elevator footage was eventually released publicly. And almost immediately, it exploded across the internet. Millions of people watched it. People slowed it down. They zoomed into the hallway. They analyzed every movement. They searched for hidden figures. They examined the elevator doors. They compared timestamps. And theories began multiplying. Some people believed Elisa was being followed. Others believed she was hiding from someone. Some thought another person had been digitally removed from the footage. Others suggested supernatural explanations. The Cecil Hotel's dark history only fueled the speculation. The building had already become associated with stories of mysterious deaths and crime. And now there was a young woman behaving strangely inside an elevator before disappearing and later being discovered in a rooftop water tank. To many people, it seemed impossible that the entire story could have an ordinary explanation. But the internet had a problem. It had a mysterious video. It had unanswered questions. And it had no complete picture of what happened during the missing period. That gap became filled with theories. One of the most discussed details was the elevator itself. Why did the doors remain open for so long? Elisa repeatedly pressed buttons. She stepped in and out. She looked around. The elevator seemed almost frozen in place. Some viewers interpreted this as evidence that another person was controlling the elevator. But there was no definitive evidence establishing that. Others believed Elisa might have been experiencing an episode related to her mental health. That theory became more significant after investigators learned about her bipolar disorder. However, even that doesn't explain every detail of the footage. What was Elisa seeing? What was she thinking? Why did she move the way she did? Those questions remain part of the fascination surrounding the case. One of the biggest theories was homicide. If Elisa had been murdered, someone would have needed to get her onto the roof and into the water tank. That would require explaining how the person accessed the rooftop and how Elisa entered the tank. Investigators found no conclusive evidence that another person was responsible for her death. There was also no established physical evidence proving that she had been assaulted before entering the tank. The official conclusion remained accidental drowning. But because the circumstances were so unusual, doubts persisted among some observers. And then came another problem. The rooftop. The Cecil Hotel's rooftop was not simply an open playground. There were security measures around the area. This created another question. How did Elisa reach the water tanks? Some reports and later discussions focused heavily on whether the roof could be accessed by hotel guests. The precise circumstances surrounding her access became one of the most debated aspects of the case. But speculation about the rooftop often went further than the evidence. People constructed elaborate theories involving secret entrances, hidden passages, accomplices, and conspiracies. None of those theories was established as fact. What we do know is much simpler and much more disturbing. Elisa disappeared. She was captured on elevator surveillance footage. She was later found dead inside a rooftop water tank. And investigators concluded that she drowned accidentally. Another element that captured public attention was the behavior of Elisa's family and the communications surrounding her trip. Her family had been expecting to hear from her. When communication stopped, they became alarmed. Her disappearance was reported. Authorities began searching. The fact that Elisa had been traveling alone made the situation even more frightening. There was no friend traveling with her who could explain what happened. There was no eyewitness who could give investigators a clear account. The elevator camera became the closest thing the public had to a final record of her movements. But surveillance footage has limits. It can show where a person was. It cannot always tell us what that person was thinking. After Elisa's body was recovered, an autopsy was performed. The cause of death was determined to be drowning. The manner of death was ruled accidental. Her bipolar disorder was identified as a significant condition. The investigation did not establish evidence that another person had caused her death. That conclusion should be separated from the internet theories that emerged later. There is a difference between saying, "We don't know exactly what happened," and saying, "Someone must have killed her." The first statement reflects the unanswered questions. The second requires evidence. And investigators did not establish that evidence. Normally, when authorities determine the cause and manner of death, a case begins to fade from public attention. Elisa Lam's case did the opposite. The elevator video kept circulating. Documentaries explored the mystery. YouTube creators analyzed individual frames. Online communities developed theories. The Cecil Hotel became famous around the world. And Elisa herself became one of the most recognizable names associated with unexplained deaths. But there is an important danger in that attention. When a real person's death becomes an internet mystery, the person can disappear behind the story. Elisa was not simply the elevator girl. She was a daughter, a sister, a student, a young woman traveling alone. Her final days became a mystery to millions of strangers, but her life was much larger than those final moments. The honest answer is that we cannot reconstruct every moment between Elisa's disappearance and the discovery of her body. The surveillance footage gives us a disturbing glimpse of her final known public movements. The investigation established that she drowned. The coroner ruled her death accidental. Her bipolar disorder was considered a significant contributing factor. But the footage doesn't tell us exactly why she behaved the way she did. It doesn't show how she reached the water tank. And it doesn't give us a conversation explaining what was happening in her mind. That uncertainty is exactly why the case continues to fascinate people. The mystery isn't necessarily that authorities never reached a conclusion. They did. The mystery is that the available footage leaves viewers staring at a few minutes of a young woman's life and wondering what happened immediately afterward. Imagine the scene. A quiet hotel. A young woman enters an elevator. The doors remain open. She looks outside. She steps out. She returns. She presses buttons. She looks around again. Then she disappears from the camera's view. That is the last known surveillance footage of Elisa Lam. Weeks later, investigators would find her in a place almost nobody expected. A rooftop water tank. The case would become one of the internet's most discussed mysteries. But despite years of theories, investigations, documentaries, and speculation, the official conclusion has remained the same. Elisa Lam died from accidental drowning. Her death was not officially classified as a homicide. And no killer was identified. Yet one question continues to haunt everyone who watches that elevator footage. What was Elisa seeing in those final moments? Maybe she was experiencing a severe mental health episode. Maybe fear had overwhelmed her. Maybe there were circumstances we will never fully understand. What we do know is that a 21-year-old woman traveled to Los Angeles, disappeared inside one of the city's most infamous hotels, and died under circumstances that captured the world's attention. And the elevator camera recorded the beginning of the mystery. But not the answer. What do you think happened to Elisa Lam? Was her death a tragic accident connected to her mental health crisis, or do you believe there are still unanswered questions surrounding the case? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy deeply researched true crime stories, mysterious disappearances, and unsolved cases, subscribe to Case Atlas and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the most frightening mysteries are the ones where the evidence gives us just enough to ask the question, but never enough to see the whole truth.